I watched Melissa's fingers fly across her phone screen, adding item after item to the cart on my wholesale account, and I smiled. She didn't see me smile. She was too busy, eyes gleaming with that familiar greed I remembered so well from my first life. The life where this exact moment had destroyed me. "Oh my God, Jenna, this is amazing," she gushed, not looking up. "I can't believe wholesale prices are this low. I'm going to make a fortune reselling these." "Take your time," I said, sipping my coffee. "Get everything you need." Everything you need to hang yourself, I didn't add. The cart total climbed. $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. In my first life, I'd been 26 years old, newly married to Melissa's brother, Derek, and desperately trying to fit into their wealthy family. I had started a small online boutique, finally gaining some independence after years of being treated like Derek's charity case. When Melissa had asked, so sweetly, so sisterly, if she could use my wholesale account to try out reselling, I'd been thrilled. Finally, acceptance. Finally, a real sister. She'd racked up $50,000 in merchandise on my account, all in my name, all my liability. Then she'd ghosted me. The wholesaler had come after me for payment. My credit was destroyed. My boutique collapsed. Derek, instead of helping, had divorced me for being financially irresponsible and embarrassing the family. His mother had made sure I didn't get a cent in the divorce, their lawyers burying me in paperwork I couldn't afford to fight. I'd spent the next 3 years in a studio apartment, working 2 jobs, drowning in debt. The final humiliation came when I saw Melissa's Instagram. Luxury vacations, designer clothes, a thriving resale business. All built on merchandise she'd never paid for. Merchandise that had ruined my life. I'd been driving home from my night shift at a warehouse when the semi-truck crossed the median. I remembered the headlights, the impact, the pain. And then I'd woken up in my bed. 3 years earlier, the morning after Derek had proposed. The first week, I thought I was insane. But everything I remembered came true, exactly as before. Derek's mother making snide comments about my humble background at dinner, Melissa's perfectly timed compliments that always came with a hidden barb. The way Derek never defended me just told me I was too sensitive. I spent a month in careful observation, taking notes, planning. I knew exactly what was coming. I knew every move they'd make. Including this one. "Okay, I think I'm done," Melissa said, setting down her phone. The cart total read $47,328. Close enough. "Are you sure about this, Jenna? I mean, I'll pay you back as soon as I sell everything, but this is a lot to put on your account." Her eyes were so sincere. In my first life, I'd believed that sincerity. "We're family," I said warmly. "Besides, you're helping me too. The more volume I do with this wholesaler, the better my account terms get." That part was actually true. What I didn't mention was that I'd already moved all my legitimate business to a different wholesaler 3 weeks ago. This account, it was bait, and she'd swallowed it whole. "You're the best." Melissa reached over and squeezed my hand. "Derek's so lucky to have you. I'll have this all paid off in 2 months, I promise." "I trust you," I lied. She submitted the order. I watched the confirmation email pop up on my phone. Purchase, $47,328. Shipping address, Melissa Chen, 1847 Parkview Drive. Not my address, hers. In my first life, I'd been too naive to notice that red flag. "So when's the merchandise arriving?" I asked innocently. "Oh, the wholesaler ships super fast. Probably 3 days." She stood up and grabbing her Chanel bag. A gift from Derek's mother, of course. I'd never gotten anything from that woman except criticism. "I have to run. Lunch with Mom. You know how she gets if I'm late." I knew. I was never invited to these lunches. After Melissa left, I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder I'd been building for the past month. Project Payback. Inside were subfolders, dozens of them. The first, wholesale account setup. I'd done my research this time. When I'd opened this particular wholesale account, I'd read every single word of their terms of service. Most people didn't. Most people just clicked agree and moved on. But buried in section 14.7c was a critical clause. In cases of suspected fraud or unauthorized use, the account holder may dispute charges if they can provide evidence that they did not receive the merchandise and did not authorize the shipping address. I had emails, dozens of them, Melissa asking to borrow my account, me expressing concerns about the high order value, her reassuring me she'd pay me back immediately, all carefully worded, all saved. And I had something else, a modified account agreement. See, when I'd first opened this Wholesale account, I'd had to provide business documentation. In my first life, I'd listed my home address as the business address. Simple. Standard. This time, I'd registered my boutique as a formal LLC. The business address on file with the state and with the wholesaler was a UPS store mailbox. Any merchandise shipped to any other address? Technically not mine, but that was just the foundation. The real trap was so much more satisfying. The next folder, Melissa's business. In my first life, I'd been too destroyed to pay attention to what Melissa did with all that merchandise. This time, I'd done my homework. Melissa wasn't just reselling items casually, she was running an actual business. Sort of. She had an LLC, Lux Finds by Melissa, which she'd registered 6 months ago. She had a website, an Instagram with 50,000 followers. Half of them bought. I'd checked. And a sales tax permit. She also had something she didn't know about, a very interested IRS. See, Melissa had been running her resale business for over a year. She'd made significant income. I'd found her old Instagram posts where she'd bragged about 5-figure months. But according to public records I'd pulled through a business database subscription, Lux Finds by Melissa had reported exactly $0 in income on last year's tax return. Tax fraud, beautiful prosecutable tax fraud. But I wasn't going to report her. Not yet. I was going to let her bury herself. The next 3 days were delicious torture. Melissa texted me constantly with updates. OMG, the shipping confirmation came tomorrow. I'm so excited I can't sleep. This is going to change everything. Derek, oblivious as always. So he asked me if I wanted to go to his company dinner on Friday. Mom specifically requested you come, he said, which was code for Mom wants to criticize your outfit and your table manners. Wouldn't miss it, I said sweetly. In my first life, I'd tried so hard to win his mother's approval. I'd worn conservative dresses, studied etiquette, laughed at the right moments. Nothing had been good enough. This time, I didn't care. I knew exactly how long this marriage would last. 6 more weeks, just long enough to see this through. The merchandise arrived at Melissa's house on a Tuesday. She sent me a photo, boxes stacked to her ceiling, her grinning in front of them like she'd won the lottery. I'll start listing everything tomorrow, she texted. You're gonna get paid back so fast. I sent back a smiley emoji and returned to my laptop. I'd been busy. While Melissa had been salivating over wholesale prices, I'd been building a case. Through some creative searching and a small payment to a private investigator, worth every penny, I'd discovered that Melissa had done this before. Not with me. I'd been her first family victim. But 18 months ago, she'd convinced a friend named Ashley to let her use Ashley's wholesale account. Ashley had been stuck with $30,000 in charges. I found Ashley through Instagram, reached out carefully, posed as someone who'd also been scammed by Melissa. Ashley had been more than happy to talk. She'd sent me everything. Screenshots of Melissa's promises to pay her back, photos of the merchandise shipped to Melissa's address, records of her attempts to get payment, and finally, the small claims court judgment she'd won against Melissa. A judgment Melissa had never paid. That went into my folder labeled Pattern of Fraud. But I needed more. I needed this to be airtight. So I did something my old self would never have had the courage to do. I made friends with people in Melissa's circle. It was easier than I expected. Melissa wasn't well liked. She was the kind of person who collected friends for status and discarded them when they were no longer useful. I found 3 other women she'd burned in various business deals. Nothing as big as what she'd done to Ashley and was about to do to me, but enough to establish a pattern. They were all willing to talk. They all had receipts, and they all wanted to see her face when she finally got caught. 1 week after the merchandise arrived, Melissa posted her first listings. I watched from my boutique office as she uploaded photos to Instagram and her website. Designer-inspired handbags, $89. Wholesale cost to me, $12. Trendy jewelry sets, $45. Wholesale cost to me, $3. Fashion scarves, $35. Wholesale cost to me, $4. The markup was insane. I'd known it would be. Melissa wasn't interested in building a sustainable business. She wanted fast cash and the appearance of success. Her followers ate it up. Take my money. Finally affordable luxury. Bestseller on Instagram. Orders poured in. I waited. 2 weeks after the merchandise arrived, I got the first email from the wholesaler. Payment due, invoice hash 847362. Amount, $47,328. I didn't respond. Melissa hadn't sent me a cent. In my first life, I'd started panicking at this point, texting her frantically, begging her to at least pay part of it. No, she'd made excuses. Sales are slow. I need to reinvest in marketing. Give me 2 more weeks. Those 2 weeks had turned into never. This time, I screenshot the email and saved it. Then I sent Melissa a casual text. "Hey, how's the resale business going?" "Amazing," she replied immediately. "I've made like $15K already. This is the best decision ever." $15,000 in sales meant maybe $5,000 in profit after her expenses. She could have paid me back a chunk. Should have paid me back a chunk if she'd had any intention of doing so. She didn't. 3 days later, a second email from the wholesaler. This one was firmer. "Urgent. Payment overdue. Invoice hash 847362. I responded this time. "I need to dispute these charges. The merchandise was not delivered to my business address, and I did not authorize delivery to an alternate location. I believe this may be fraud." Their response came within hours. "They took fraud seriously. It cost them money. Please provide all relevant documentation. We will investigate and may pursue criminal charges if fraud is confirmed." I sent them everything. The email chain with Melissa, screenshots of her Instagram showing the merchandise I'd supposedly ordered, photos of her website selling items that were shipped to my account. The shipping confirmation showing delivery to her address, not mine. And then I sent them Ashley's information. I believe this individual has done this before. Here is a previous victim who may be willing to provide additional evidence. The wholesaler's investigation began. Meanwhile, Melissa kept selling. Her Instagram stories showed her packing orders, posing with products, going out for expensive dinners with the money she was making. Money that should have been mine, or rather, money she should have been using to pay off the debt she'd incurred in my name. At dinner with Derek and his family that Friday, his mother asked me how my little boutique was going. "Very well, actually," I said. "I'm transitioning to a new wholesaler with better terms." "How ambitious," she said in a tone that meant the opposite. "Melissa's resale business is doing wonderfully. She has such a head for commerce." I smiled. "She does have a talent for taking advantage of opportunities." Melissa beamed, missing the double meaning entirely. Derek's mother continued, "It's good that you girls support each other. Family is so important." "Absolutely," I agreed. "Family should always be held accountable for their actions. Don't you think?" Another double meaning sailing over their heads. 4 weeks after the merchandise arrived, Melissa had sold roughly 60% of it. Her Instagram was full of testimonials from happy customers, photos of her home office, the spare bedroom filled with inventory, and inspirational quotes about being a girl boss and building an empire. She'd sent me exactly $0. She had, however, bought herself a new car, a BMW. She posted about it on Instagram. "Treat yourself, you deserve it. #blessed, #success, #entrepreneur life." I screenshot that too. It went in a folder labeled Dissipation of Assets. The wholesaler's investigation concluded. They sent me a detailed email. "Based on the evidence provided, we have determined that you were the victim of fraud. The charges to your account were unauthorized. As evidenced by the delivery address not matching your business address, your email communications expressing concern about the order, and the subsequent sale of said merchandise by the individual who received it, we are removing these charges from your account. We will be pursuing collection against Melissa Chen directly, as well as exploring criminal fraud charges. We appreciate your cooperation in this matter and apologize for the inconvenience." The charges disappeared from my account like they'd never existed. But Melissa's nightmare was just beginning. See, when the wholesaler removed the charges from my account, they didn't just write off the loss. They transferred the debt to Melissa. She got the first notice 3 days later. I knew because she called me screaming, "Jenna, what the fuck did you do?" I'd never heard her this angry. In my first life, she'd been nothing but sweet and apologetic, while never actually paying me, right up until she blocked me. "What do you mean?" I asked innocently. "The wholesaler is saying I owe them $50,000. They're saying it's fraud. They're threatening to sue me." "Well, you did order all that merchandise. On your account. You said I could use it." "I said you could use it for a small order, maybe a few $100s, not $50,000. And I definitely didn't authorize you to have it shipped to your house." You never said, I have the emails, Melissa, where I specifically expressed concern about the amount you were ordering, where I asked you to keep it small. You assured me it would be fine. Silence on the other end. You set me up, she finally said, her voice cold. No, I said calmly. You set yourself up. You committed fraud. You used my account to order merchandise you had no intention of paying for, had it shipped to your address, and then sold it for profit while leaving me with the bill. That's textbook fraud. Derek will what? Take your side over his wife's? Over his wife who was the victim of your crime? More silence. The wholesaler is going to sue you, I continued. They have all the evidence they need. The shipping records, the emails, your Instagram showing you selling their merchandise, and Melissa, I know about Ashley. I heard her breath catch. I know about the $30,000 you stuck her with. I know about the judgment she won against you that you never paid. I know about every shady business deal you've done, and I've documented all of it. You can't. I already have. The wholesaler has it, and if they decide to press criminal charges, the prosecutor will have it too. I hung up. She tried to call back 17 times. I didn't answer. Derek called an hour later. Jenna, Melissa is hysterical. She says you're trying to destroy her. I'm not trying to destroy her, Derek. I'm protecting myself from her fraud. Fraud? Come on, this is clearly a misunderstanding. She ordered $50,000 worth of merchandise on my account, had it shipped to her house, sold it for profit, and never paid me a cent. What part of that is a misunderstanding? She said she was going to pay you back? When? It's been 4 weeks. She's made thousands in sales. She bought a new BMW, but she hasn't sent me $1. Well, maybe if you'd been patient. Patient? Derek, she committed fraud. She did this to someone else before. A woman named Ashley. She stuck her with $30,000 and never paid that either. This is what Melissa does. You're being dramatic. This is family. Exactly. I'm your wife. I'm your family. And your sister defrauded me. Why aren't you angry with her? He didn't have an answer for that. Talk to your mother, he finally said. She'll help sort this out. He hung up. I knew what would happen next. Melissa would run crying to Derek's mother, paint herself as the victim, and Derek's mother would pressure Derek to pressure me to drop it. In my first life, that pressure would have worked. I'd been so desperate for their approval, so afraid of losing Derek that I would have done anything. This time, I was already 3 steps ahead. The next morning, I got a call from Derek's mother, Patricia. Jenna, we need to talk. Of course, Patricia. What about? This situation with Melissa. She's family. Surely we can work this out privately without involving lawyers and criminal allegations. Patricia, Melissa committed fraud. This isn't a family squabble. It's a crime. Don't be so dramatic. She made a mistake. She'll pay you back. When? She's had 4 weeks. She's made thousands. She bought a luxury car, but she hasn't paid me a cent. She's building a business. She needs capital. Then she should have used her own money, not committed fraud with mine. I'm asking you, as family, to drop this. Derek is very upset. Derek should be upset with his sister for committing a crime, not with me for being her victim. Patricia's voice turned cold. If you pursue this, there will be consequences. For your marriage. For your place in this family. And there it was. The threat. The same threat she'd used in my first life to pressure me into silence, into accepting blame, into crawling away with nothing. Patricia, I said calmly, I'm not dropping this. Melissa is going to face the consequences of her actions. And if that upsets you or Derek or anyone else in this family, that's your choice. But I'm not setting myself on fire to keep any of you warm anymore. I hung up. Derek came home that night furious. You hung up on my mother? She threatened me. She said there would be consequences for my marriage if I didn't drop the fraud case against Melissa. She's trying to help. She's trying to protect Melissa from facing consequences for her crime. Your sister defrauded me, Derek. She stole from me. And your family is mad at me for not letting her get away with it. She didn't steal from you. Yes, she did. She used my account without authorization for an amount I explicitly objected to, had merchandise shipped to her address, sold it for profit, and never paid me. That's theft. That's fraud. Those are crimes. You're blowing this out of proportion. Am I? Or are you minimizing it because you'd rather I just accept being victimized than deal with the fact that your sister is a criminal? His face went red. Don't call her that. It's what she is. She did this to someone before. She has a judgment against her that she never paid. This is a pattern, Derek. She's a con artist who uses people and discards them when they're no longer useful. I think you should leave. I stared at him. Excuse me? Go stay somewhere else for a few days until you calm down and can approach this rationally. Rationally. As if I was the one being irrational. In my first life, this would have devastated me. I would have begged him to let me stay, promised to drop everything, done anything to save the marriage. This time, I smiled. Fine, I'll pack a bag. I went to the bedroom and packed carefully. Clothes, toiletries, laptop, documents, and the thumb drive hidden in my jewelry box. The one with copies of everything. Every email, every photo, every piece of evidence against Melissa, every record of my assets and Derek's, every text message from Patricia threatening me, everything I'd need for the divorce, because this marriage was over. I'd known it would be from the moment I woke up in the past. Derek wasn't a partner. He was a mama's boy who would always choose his family's comfort over my basic dignity. I'd stayed this long only to see this through. I texted my friend Rachel, a real friend, one I'd made outside Derek's circle, and asked if I could stay with her. Of course, she replied. What happened? I'll tell you when I get there. I walked out of Derek's condo with my suitcase. He watched me go without a word. At Rachel's apartment, I told her everything. Not just about Melissa's current fraud, but about my rebirth, my first life, all of it. I expected her to think I was crazy. Instead, she poured us both wine and said, "So you're telling me you got a do-over and you're using it to destroy the people who destroyed you?" Essentially. That's the most badass thing I've ever heard. What can I do to help? I loved Rachel. Actually, I said. So pulling out my laptop, there is something. I showed her my documentation. Everything I'd collected on Melissa. I need to make sure this goes to the right people. The wholesaler is already suing her, but there's more. She's committed tax fraud. She's violated a previous judgment. She's running a business built on stolen merchandise. Rachel, who worked in corporate law, looked through everything with professional interest. This is really comprehensive, she said. You've got her on multiple counts. The wholesaler will get their money through the civil suit. But the tax fraud, that's federal. And if she's been doing this for years, she has. You could report her to the IRS. They have a whistleblower program. If she owes significant back taxes, you'd actually get a percentage of what they recover. I hadn't known that. How much are we talking? Rachel did some quick math based on Melissa's Instagram posts about her income. If she's been claiming zero income while making 5 figures monthly, she probably owes 6 figures in back taxes and penalties. The IRS doesn't mess around with tax fraud. File the report, I said. While Rachel handled the IRS whistleblower submission, I focused on the next phase, the divorce. I'd been preparing for this too. In my first life, Derek's family lawyers had buried me. I'd been too poor to fight, too overwhelmed to think straight. This time, I'd hired a lawyer 2 weeks ago, a really good one. I'd paid her retainer with money from my boutique, the real boutique I'd been building quietly while everyone thought I was just playing at business. See, knowing what was coming had its advantages. I knew which products would trend. I knew which Instagram strategies would work. I knew which wholesalers were reliable. My boutique wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. I'd quietly built it up over the past 3 months, keeping it low-key, not posting about my success on social media where Derek's family could see. I had 6 figures in a business bank account that Derek didn't know about. I'd also been documenting everything about our marriage. Every time Derek dismissed my concerns, every time his mother criticized me, every text message, every email, every incident, I'd recorded the conversation where Derek kicked me out for refusing to drop the fraud case against his sister. My lawyer loved me. "This is the most prepared client I've ever had," she said when I met with her the next morning. "Oh, you have everything we need." "How bad is this going to be for him?" She smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Well, you came into the marriage with nothing. You've built a business during the marriage, but you kept it in your own name. And you can prove you built it with your own labor and separate funds. He can't claim any of that." Good. His family will fight. They'll try to drag it out, make it expensive, pressure you to settle. I don't care. I want out, I want it clean, and I want them to understand they can't bully me anymore. Then that's what you'll get. I filed for divorce the next day. Derek called me shocked. Divorce? You filed for divorce? You kicked me out of our home because I wouldn't let your sister get away with defrauding me. Yes, Derek. Well, I'm divorcing you. This is insane. What's insane is expecting me to stay married to someone who values his con artist sister more than his wife. We can fix this? No, we can't. This marriage has been over for a long time. I just didn't want to see it. That last part was true. In my first life, I hadn't wanted to see it. I'd been so desperate to make it work. My lawyer will be in touch, I said, and hung up. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The wholesaler sued Melissa. She tried to claim she didn't have the money to pay, but my lawyer, who was also advising the wholesaler's legal team, provided them with evidence of her BMW purchase, her designer clothes, her expensive lifestyle. The judge ordered her to liquidate assets to pay the judgment. Melissa had to sell her new BMW. She had to sell most of her inventory. She had to sell her designer handbags and clothes, and she still didn't have enough. The judge garnished her wages from her day job, the one she'd been neglecting to focus on her business empire. Meanwhile, the IRS came knocking. Turned out Rachel was right. Melissa owed over $150,000 in back taxes and penalties. The IRS seized her bank accounts. They put a lien on the house she'd been renting. She didn't own it, but the lien meant she couldn't get any property until the debt was paid. Her business collapsed. Her Instagram followers disappeared when she couldn't fulfill orders. Her empire crumbled. And Ashley, remember Ashley, finally got her judgment paid. The IRS seizure meant the court could enforce the previous judgment. Ashley got her $30,000, plus interest and court costs. Melissa tried to declare bankruptcy, but tax debt isn't dischargeable. She was stuck with it. She tried to run to Derek and Patricia for help. They didn't give her a cent. See, Derek and Patricia had a reputation to maintain. And being associated with a tax fraudster who was all over the local business news, that didn't fit their image. Patricia actually released a statement to their social circle. We're disappointed in Melissa's choices and hope she learns from this experience. Translation, you're on your own. Melissa posted a rambling Instagram story blaming me for ruining her life and setting her up. She deleted it an hour later when her lawyer, a public defender since she couldn't afford private counsel anymore, told her it could be used against her if the DA decided to file criminal charges. The DA was still deciding. The wholesaler wanted blood. My divorce from Derek went through smoothly. He tried to fight at first, but when my lawyer showed his lawyer everything I had, the recordings, the documentation, the evidence of his family's harassment, they settled fast. No alimony, no division of assets beyond what I'd brought in. A clean break. I walked away free. Derek's mother tried one last time to talk to me at the final divorce hearing. You've destroyed this family, she said. I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd made my first life hell. This woman who'd raised a son who thought his wife should accept being defrauded to keep the peace. This woman who'd enabled Melissa's behavior for years. No, Patricia, I said. I held your family accountable. There's a difference. I walked away and never looked back. 6 months later, I was in my new apartment, a beautiful loft downtown that I'd bought with money from my boutique. The business was booming. I'd hired 2 employees. I was featured in a local magazine article about successful young entrepreneurs. Rachel came over with champagne to celebrate. To new beginnings, she toasted. To second chances, I corrected. We drank. My phone buzzed. An email from the IRS whistleblower office. Your case has been resolved. The subject has entered into a payment plan for the full amount of back taxes owed. As the whistleblower, you are entitled to 15% of the recovered amount. Please see attached payment information. I did the math. 15% of $150,000 was $22,500. The IRS was paying me $22,500 for reporting Melissa's tax fraud. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. What? Rachel asked. I showed her the email. Oh my God, she said. You got paid for taking her down. Poetic justice, I said. That night, I allowed myself to think about my first life. The pain, the humiliation, the way they'd all made me feel small and worthless. And then I thought about this life, how I'd used my knowledge to protect myself, to build something real, to make them face consequences they'd never expected. Melissa was drowning in debt she'd never escape. Derek was divorced and had a reputation in his social circle as someone who'd chosen his con artist sister over his wife. Patricia had lost the daughter-in-law she'd enjoyed belittling and had gained a son who was now seen as spineless. And me? I was free, successful, happy. I'd let Melissa use my Wholesale account. I'd watched her order $50,000 in merchandise. I'd been liable for the payment. But I'd turned her trap into my triumph. The next morning, I got a message request on Instagram. From Melissa. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. "I know you hate me," it read. "I know I messed up, but I'm drowning here. The IRS takes half my paycheck. I'm living in a studio apartment with 3 roommates. I can't even afford groceries some weeks. Please, can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long moment. In my first life, this would have been my reality. The studio apartment, the crushing debt, the desperate pleas for help that went unanswered. I thought about responding, thought about telling her exactly how it felt to be in that position, thought about making her understand the pain she'd caused, but then I realized she already knew. She was living it. I deleted the message request without responding. Some people spend their whole lives wondering, what if? What if they'd made different choices? What if they'd stood up for themselves? What if they'd seen the warning signs? I didn't have to wonder. I'd lived the nightmare, and then I'd been given the rarest gift, a chance to rewrite it. I'd rewritten it perfectly. 3 years later, my boutique had expanded to 3 locations. I'd been featured in Forbes' 30 under 30 inches for retail innovation. I'd bought a house, a real house, not a condo, in the nicest neighborhood in the city. I was engaged to Marcus, a software engineer I'd met at a business networking event. He was kind, supportive, and thought it was badass that I'd built my business from nothing. He didn't have a manipulative family. He didn't expect me to shrink myself to fit into his life. He added to my life, and I added to his. We were equals. I drove past Derek's old condo one day. I was in the area for a supplier meeting. There was a for sale sign in front. Out of curiosity, I looked up the listing online. Derek had lost his job. According to the public record, he'd been let go from his firm 6 months ago. The condo was being sold to cover debts. Turned out that being known as the guy who kicked out his wife for not accepting his sister's fraud wasn't great for a career in finance, where trust and integrity mattered. Patricia had apparently cut him off financially, embarrassed by his divorce and job loss. Melissa was still drowning in IRS debt. She'd tried to start a new business, some kind of coaching program, but it had flopped when people discovered her background. Ashley had used her recovered $30,000 to start her own successful boutique. We'd actually become friends. We'd met for coffee once, bonded over our shared experience of being Melissa's victims, and now we collaborated on joint promotions sometimes. The other women Melissa had scammed had all moved on too. We'd formed a little network, supporting each other's businesses, referring customers to each other. We called ourselves the Phoenix Collective, rising from the ashes of what Melissa had tried to destroy. One evening, Marcus and I were having dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. I was telling him about a new product line I was launching when I heard a familiar voice. "Jenna?" I looked up. Melissa stood next to our table, wearing a server's uniform. She looked tired. Older than she should have at 29. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a generic black server outfit. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No expensive highlights, no perfect makeup. "Melissa," I said evenly. I work here," she said unnecessarily. "I didn't expect to see you. It's a free country." She glanced at Marcus, at my engagement ring, at my designer dress. "You look good," she said. "Really good." "Thank you." There was an awkward pause. "I'm sorry," she finally said, "for everything. I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I really am sorry." I studied her face, looking for the con, the angle, the manipulation, but all I saw was exhaustion and regret. "I accept your apology," I said. She looked surprised. "But that doesn't mean I forgive you," I continued. "You didn't just make a mistake, Melissa. You deliberately defrauded me. You destroyed my credit, my business, my marriage. Wait, I didn't destroy your marriage. I caught myself. You were the catalyst. Derek chose protecting you over protecting me. That told me everything I needed to know about what our marriage was worth." She looked down. I heard he lost his job. I heard that too. Mom won't help him. She said he's an embarrassment. That's unfortunate. Another pause. I have to get back to work, she said. But I really am sorry. She walked away to attend to another table. Marcus looked at me. That was her? The one who... Yeah. Wow, she looks like someone who finally faced the consequences of her actions. Do you feel bad for her? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I said. I feel nothing. She made her choices. This is where those choices led. I didn't do this to her. She did it to herself. Fair enough. We finished our meal. The food was excellent. The wine was perfect. The company was wonderful. As we were leaving, I left a generous tip, but I didn't leave it for Melissa. I made sure to hand it to a different server. Some people might call that petty. I called it setting boundaries. On the drive home, Marcus asked, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't caught on to her scam?" I almost laughed. If only he knew. I think, I said carefully, that everything happens for a reason. I went through something hard, but it made me stronger. It taught me to protect myself. It showed me who people really were. Well, I'm glad you did, because if you hadn't, we might never have met. That was true. In my first life, I'd been too broken, too poor, too destroyed to attend the networking event where I'd met Marcus. This life, this beautiful, successful, happy life, only existed because I'd been given a second chance and hadn't wasted it. 5 years after my rebirth, I was standing in my flagship boutique watching customers browse the racks when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Jenna Chen? Yes. This is Detective Morrison with the White Collar Crimes Division. I'm calling about a case involving Melissa Chen. We have some questions about the fraud she committed against you several years ago. My heart skipped. Is this about the Wholesale account? That and several other incidents. Miss Chen has been arrested for wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. It appears she's been running various scams for nearly a decade. You're one of at least 15 victims we've identified. 15? We'd like you to come in and give a formal statement. Your documentation from the original case has been very helpful, but we need more details for the prosecution. Of course. When? We set up an appointment. After I hung up, I just stood there for a moment. 15 victims. Melissa had been doing this to people for years, and she'd gotten away with it until she'd messed with me in a life where I knew what was coming. I'd thought my revenge was complete. The civil suit, the IRS debt, the bankruptcy. But this was criminal. Melissa could go to prison. I should have felt triumphant, victorious, vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. Not of the fight. I'd fight the same fight again in a heartbeat, but tired of having to fight it all. At the police station, Detective Morrison showed me evidence I'd never seen before. Melissa had been running romance scams, business scams, investment scams. She'd stolen identities. She'd forged documents. She'd left a trail of destroyed credit scores and broken lives. How did she get away with it for so long? I asked. She was smart. She'd scam someone just below the threshold where they'd involve police. A few thousand here, 5,000 there. Most people would just write it off as a loss. And when they did report it, the cases were in different jurisdictions, different states. No one connected the dots. Until now. Until now. Your case gave us the thread we needed to pull. Once we started investigating you, we found the others. They all had the same pattern, the same MO. What happens now? She's looking at 15 to 20 years if convicted on all counts. Federal prison, no parole. 15 to 20 years. Melissa would be in her 40s when she got out. Middle-aged, unemployable with a felony record. Alone. How do you feel about that? Detective Morrison asked. How did I feel? I feel like justice is being served, I said. Not just for me, but for everyone she hurt. The trial took 8 months. I testified. So did Ashley. So did the 13 other victims they'd found. One was a single mother who'd lost her life savings. One was an elderly woman who'd been convinced to invest in a fake business. One was a veteran who'd been scammed out of his disability settlement. Melissa had destroyed lives, real people. The jury took 4 hours to find her guilty on all counts. She got 18 years. I watched her being led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. She didn't look at me. Didn't look at anyone. Outside the courthouse, the other victims gathered. We'd formed a bond through this process, a support group of sorts. "Thank you," the single mother said to me. "If you hadn't been so thorough, if you hadn't documented everything, we might never have gotten justice." "We got justice together," I said. That night, Marcus asked me if I felt closure. "I don't know," I admitted. "She's going to prison. She can't hurt anyone else. But does that erase what she did? Does it fix the lives she destroyed?" "No. But it stops her from destroying more." That was true, and maybe that was enough. 10 years after my rebirth, I was a completely different person than I'd been in my first life. I owned 6 boutiques across 3 states. I'd been featured in magazines, podcasts, business programs. I'd given talks at universities about entrepreneurship and resilience. Marcus and I had been married for 7 years. We had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I'd written a book about my business journey. It was vague about the personal details. I'd changed names, altered facts, but the core message was there. Sometimes you have to protect yourself, even from family. Sometimes you have to choose your own well-being over keeping the peace. Sometimes the people who hurt you won't face consequences unless you make them. The book became a bestseller. I got letters from readers, hundreds of them. People who'd been scammed by family members, abused by in-laws, or betrayed by people they trusted. "Your book gave me the courage to report my brother for stealing from me." "I filed for divorce after reading your chapter on choosing yourself." "I finally stood up to my mother-in-law and set boundaries." I'd turned my trauma into something that helped people. That felt like the ultimate victory. Melissa got out of prison after serving 12 years. I heard about it through the victim notification system. Part of me wondered if she'd try to contact me, apologize again, ask for help. She didn't. According to the public record, she moved to a different state, changed her name, worked a series of low-wage jobs under her new identity. She never scammed anyone again. At least not that I heard about. Maybe prison had actually reformed her. Or maybe she'd just learned not to get caught. I didn't care either way. She wasn't my problem anymore. On the 15th anniversary of my rebirth, a date only I knew was significant, I took a day to myself. I drove to the beach, sat on the sand, watched the waves. 15 years ago, I'd been at rock bottom, divorced, broken, and then I'd been given an impossible gift, a chance to do it over. I'd used that chance to build an empire, to find real love, to raise a family, to help others. I'd used it to become someone I was proud to be. But more than that, I'd used it to make sure Melissa faced consequences, real consequences, the kind that changed the trajectory of a life. In my first life, she destroyed me and walked away untouched. In this life, I'd let her think she was destroying me again, and then I destroyed her instead. She'd used my Wholesale account. She'd bought $50,000 in merchandise. I'd been liable for payment, but I'd turned her victory into her downfall. And that, I thought, as I watched the sun set over the ocean, was the sweetest revenge of all. Not just surviving, thriving, not just healing, making sure she could never hurt anyone else again. I'd been given a second chance at life, and I'd used it to make sure Melissa didn't get one.